days ahead of the Global FinTech Fest, NPCI has launched a much touted RBI initiative known as Delegate Payments on UPI. And this makes you wonder, right? Like, what else does NPCI and RBI have up their sleeve planned for us in the week ahead? But anyways, till we actually get to GFF 2024, your friendly FinTech chronicler thought of covering this brand new payment toy, understand the market that it aims to serve, and also take a sneak peek into the dark side of potentially how something like UPI Circle and delegate payments on UPI could be hacked and could be used by scamsters to connive people out of their hard-earned money if they aren't being too careful. But of course, a lot more details will follow after the NPCI demo at GFF. Still, till then, in this community edition of the FinTech Chronicler podcast, what we will be kind of covering is one, the product description of UPI Circle, how UPI works and the current economic structure for UPI, the market share that UPI has captured in India's digital payment ecosystem, some of the technical details of delegate payment, and what I feel are like the biggest security concerns with respect to delegate payments. But before we get started, some basic house rules as usual. Because this is a community podcast, it is your show. Which means at any point in time that you feel I'm not making sense, or you have had a different experience, or you just know something that I've missed out completely, feel free to raise your hand, which is at the bottom right corner of your LinkedIn screen. I will pull you right up and we will have an amazing discussion. And of course, we will learn a lot from each other. So with that said, let's get started with what is it that UPI Circle aims to do. And this is basically a product description of everything that you need to know about delegate payments on UPI. Now imagine if you're a parent or even a single child like me who's living away from her old parents. Have you ever wished, maybe you could just clone yourself, a version of yourself who just sits and monitors and safeguards all of the digital transactions that your wards do? Well, the folks at NPCI have cooked up something that's exactly for this, UPI Circle. It's like creating your own financial squad, minus the superhero capes. Although, I am totally for adding all those extra layers of security and whatnot. Anyway, some of the key highlights about UPI Circle and delegate payments. So this feature, it allows a primary holder of a UPI account to delegate transactional rights to a secondary user. This feature is designed to enhance the accessibility of digital payments, particularly within families and joint accounts, and maybe even for small businesses. By the way, I have worked up like a brief 10-second explainer video of UPI Circles, which I shall post during the week sometime. But for those of you who are joining the LinkedIn audio podcast, a brief discussion of how is it that UPI Circle works, the technical details of it. So you have the primary and the secondary user. The primary user is the account holder who initiates the circle and controls the delegation. The secondary user is like a trusted individual within their family who's granted access to the account for the purpose of making payments. Now the primary user, while the primary user can add up to 5 delegates, a secondary user can only have one primary user linked to them. And there's also a cap on the amount that you can transact as a secondary user. So there's a cap of 5 per transaction per delegate. And at a monthly level, there is a 15,000 cap as well. So this is ostensibly to limit the frauds and the exploits that could potentially happen with this product. Now coming to the delegation process itself, there are 2 types of delegations. One is the full delegation, where the secondary user can make payments up to whatever limit which was set for them without requiring any approval or authorization from the primary user's end. The second type of delegation is a partial delegation, where for every transaction that the secondary user initiates, the primary will need to enter their UPI PIN and complete the transaction. Of course, there are a lot of other security features which are native to UPI apps as well, like 2-factor authentication. A lot of apps also use biometric controls, etc. Now, on the linking and transaction monitoring, while I could not find a lot of official detail from the NPCI site, so I am really looking forward to the official demo that they'll have. But there is also a lot of security mechanisms that are kind of keyed into the linking process for your delegate accounts. Some say that there's going to be a QR based delegation mechanism. Others say that it could also just be a link that's sent onto the UPI account from the secondary user's mobile number. You could also do a manual entry using mobile numbers that are there in your phone book. But yes, no official. So I will be looking forward to the official demo from NPCI during GFF. On the transaction monitoring side, yes, what they've mentioned is that while the primary account holder will have complete access and visibility to all the transactions that the secondary users have done, it's not the same for secondary users, and no secondary user will be able to see the transactions that are done by other secondary users, which I think again is a very good design decision there as well. Of course, let's also talk about the flow that is there. So you have the setup. Someone has to actually set up a circle. So the primary user can set up a circle. And then there's a transaction initiation and a transaction monitoring and transaction a mechanism to kind of control the transactions also. So as a primary user, you can control limits for each of your secondary users as well. You can also decide if secondary user A, you want to have a partial delegation, whereas you trust secondary user B, so you'll have a complete delegation over there. And there is of course a reconcile and settlement mechanism that happens at the day end as well, for you to figure out what is it that your different delegates have been up to. So what are some of the reasons to love a payment product like this? Of course, one, I think it's super family friendly, because if you are a parent who's trying to teach your kid money management, now you can bring your whole clan onto your UPI app and set in those controls as well. So of course, for every parent who's kind of I won't call them control freak, but yes, want to manage their children's money, that is also, you can set those limits as well. And it's like being a benevolent financial overlord of sorts. Of course, the third great thing about this is it is expanding the umbrella of inclusion. So even if you're someone who doesn't have a bank account, maybe you just have a joint account with someone else, then in that case also, you can now start benefiting from UPI and the ubiquitous nature of UPI payments. So now that we have all the good stuff out of the way, I think it's important to spend some time in understanding the details of UPI, because this is where I think the flaws of delegate payments also come out, and we'll also get into the economics of UPI, because it's important to understand who has what onus in the ecosystem and what is it that scamsters are most likely to want to exploit when it comes to delegate payments. So starting off with how is it that UPI payment works. So there are basically there are two legs to a UPI transaction. One is, and the settlement flow is more or less the same. It's just that the settlement cycles varies from the different types of transactions that we have. And when it comes to transactions also, there are two types of UPI transactions. One which is known as the collect flow. Collect is where a merchant initiates the transaction and uses your UPI ID to send you a payment request, and then you have to go in, open your app, authorize that payment, add your PIN to it to authorize that payment, and once authorized, that payment is completed. Then the other transaction type is the intent flow, where typically if you're doing a transaction online, what we do is we select UPI, we select our UPI app, preferred UPI app, and give our UPI ID into the merchant side, and the UPI app itself opens up on the merchant side, pre-filled with the merchant's details and the transaction amount. You'll again have to put in your PIN in order to authorize the transaction, and yes, the rest of it flows like that. The settlement, however, now once the transaction flow is completed, you get a debit notification, the merchant gets a credit notification. Those are just notifications. The settlement, however, happens for collect payments. I think it happens only twice a day. And for UPI intent payment, there are batches that keep running on every 15 minutes, which basically what NPCI does is it reconciles all of the different UPI transactions that have happened between every pair of banks that are enabled on the UPI network, and sends them a record that says this is the net position that you have against bank XYZ. And then bank XYZ initiates the transfer and whatever, vice versa. After which, at the beneficiary's bank end, they again do their recon process to transfer the money from that net pool account where the net amount hit into the end customer and beneficiary's account. So that's kind of how UPI works. Just taking a quick pause because I know I went quite fast over there just to see if anyone has any doubts. If not, I'm good to continue with this. Yeah, I also see my mom and my dad both have joined me. So I'm very happy that, instead of having dinner, both of you have decided to join me. Thank you so much, Mama, Papa, especially because I think this is definitely a tool that all of you should be aware of, and also be aware of the potential scams or frauds that can happen on UPI circles. But anyways, let's move on to the economics of UPI, because it's very important to kind of understand who makes money where in the UPI ecosystem, because it also means that the onus of these transactions and monitoring of these transactions should then lie with those entities, right? Anyways, so like all of you know, UPI is free to use for both the merchants and for us end consumers as well. Which means that the banks that initiate the payment and the bank that receives the payment make no money in the entire transaction flow of UPI. Of course, all banks, basis the transaction volumes that they generate, are given like a revenue share from the government. The government does give them like some sort of subsidies against all of the transactions that are done, but that's really small when compared to the volumes that these banks are handling. However, NPCI does have something known as a switching fees. Now, switching fees is basically, so NPCI connects all of the different banks, right, that are there in the process, and there can be up to 5 banks in the entire process. So making sure that it's making each of those connections wisely and correctly, that's what NPCI does. The day end or the batch end reconciliation and settlement process, initiating that between banks, sending those files to banks, that's also something that NPCI does, for which they charge a switching fee on top of UPI. And so I was doing some back of the envelope calculations to figure out what this percentage might be, because I honestly could not find anything in public domain. So in the fiscal year 2023, which ended in March 2023, NPCI's total income was about 2,200 crores, and their revenue from operations was around almost 2,000 crores. And in that year, the total number of UPI payments that were processed overall stood at about 139 lakh crore rupees. Now, assuming, because not every transaction would have a switching fee, it kicks in after a particular transaction limit. Let's assume that 75% of that revenue from operations came from UPI switching fees alone. So that kind of roughly translates into a 0.2% switching fee that NPCI gets for every UPI transaction that we initiate. And the point, again, I'm reiterating that to note over here is that banks, the initiator of the payment and the final beneficiary bank of the payment, don't make any money in this process. This is important because when it comes to other payment mechanisms like a card or a credit card, debit card, any of those payments, a big chunk of the MDR or the merchant discount rate does go to the bank that's issued that particular card. And this is because the issuing bank does a lot of checks at their end, right? From, the fraud detection and fraud monitoring, anti-money laundering, having all of those complex algorithms run at the back end, and also ensuring that the customer's money is safeguarded through mechanisms such as refunds, reversal of payments, and chargebacks as well. But when it comes to UPI, banks don't have an onus to run all of these operations because they're not making money off of UPI. It's a digital public infrastructure. With that said, I think I'd like to slightly pivot into understanding how large is it that UPI is in India and how much more larger can it grow. So for this, I took up the latest NPCI report, which said that this was from June 2024, by the way. So there, NPCI mentioned that there were close to about 350 million active users. 350 million, did I read that right? Yes. And the adult population, which if we take about 65% of our India's bulbous population, so India's population is about 1.5 billion people. Even if we say 65% of that is adult population, that's roughly about 950 million people. So that means transacting UPI active users is only 37% of the adult population, which means that UPI has room to grow and touch the remaining 63% also. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be like, hold on, that's just being over optimistic, because only 47% of the adult population is really employed, right? The remaining 53% are pretty much dependent on others. And this dependent on others section is exactly a perfect match made in heaven for a product like UPI Circle. Now that we've understood how much more is it that UPI can grow with delegate payments or UPI Circle, I think it's very important to spend some time to understand delegate payments outside of UPI, because I don't know how many of you are aware, but the latest hack that happened on WazirX, which is one of India's biggest it's a centralized crypto exchange. The exploit or the hack that happened at WazirX's end was because of vulnerability in the delegate payment systems itself. So if we can't learn from that and kind of foster all of our learnings and understanding of delegate payment into UPI, well then it definitely does give me the heebie-jeebies over there. So to understand delegate payments, I think the different components and the tech considerations, let's just go through it one by one. So delegate payments typically use an API first approach. So they have standardized APIs for integrating between the payment gateway and the core banking system, etc., etc. So this also offers for flexibility and scalability, plus you can quickly deploy them and update any update that happens, you can quickly update those also. Then they have a set of secure electronic transaction protocols and encryption algorithms that they use to ensure that the data that is being transmitted during the payment stays secure and can't be hacked by third parties. The third thing is a very strong customer authentication. So like for example, in the case of UPI, in general UPI payments, you have a two-factor authentication. You can also augment that with biometric based authentication mechanisms to help reduce frauds and ensure that only the authorized users are accessing and initiating those payments. Then the fourth component is a delegation framework. So this manages the authority of the proxies or the secondaries over delegated transactions. So you can assign roles and permissions and ensure that only that particular proxy or secondary is able to access the necessary delegated payments and nothing else. There are a lot of transaction authorization algorithms also that kick in over here to ensure that you can set such predefined criteria. Like for example, in UPI Circle, we have the transaction limits that are set, so that even if data is say maliciously captured by someone else, it can't, the risks of it is kind of, you kind of just limit the risk exposure that's there over there. Then the sixth component that's there is the tokenization. So here, this means that every payment, the primary payment data that's there, be it their card data or their account data, all of it gets encrypted into a unique token, which if it gets access to unauthorized parties, it's basically junk because they can't use it outside of the tokenizer's environment. And of course, there are delegation management, so which means you can revoke, you can time box your delegates and all of those. So those are like the 7 pieces of a delegate payment. Now, despite how awesome this technology sounds, it's actually not without its own perils. So some of the dark sides of delegate payment, I think what had happened in the case of WazirX, so the learnings that we got from WazirX is identity spoofing and unauthorized access is still the top way to misuse delegate payment systems, and a huge vulnerability over there. Then there's also data tampering and manipulation, where attackers can exploit the vulnerabilities in this delegate payment. So they don't tamper with, they tamper with the end data packets that's going in. So it looks like as if the authorization is coming to a legit end user only. But instead, what they do when what the hackers do when they tamper with this is they change some of the digits so that it ends up going to an unauthorized party. You may have said that, for example, my good friend Garv is there in the audience. So maybe I wanted to initiate as a delegate, I wanted to initiate a payment to Garv's account because, I really loved his stand-up comedy show that he had last night. But instead, what the hackers do is, instead of it being Garv's account, they manipulate it, they tamper with it to make it look like as if on the front end it is Garv's account, but actually the money when it's being transmitted ends up going to the hacker's account. So this, and when we, in the world of cryptocurrencies, when we come into smart contracts, the delegate call function's address also can be spoofed in a similar manner, so that it looks like as if a legit delegate payer is only making the transaction, But of course, it's actually the attacker who's just draining your wallet of all of your money, which was what, by the way, happened in the case of WazirX. So that's about all that I had about delegate payments. Does UPI Circle, can it open the doors to financial inclusion? Definitely, yes. But does it also open doors for like a backdoor access for scamsters to easily get access to the accounts of, say, the elderly in our family, the people who are the most vulnerable? Well, if you don't have proper security safeguards, that's what I think might happen. Anyways, that's it for this edition. So if you guys are attending the Global FinTech Fest, I would love to catch up and meet all of you in person as well. And I will definitely see all of you the next week with some juicy updates from the Global FinTech Fest. Till then, take care. Bye.